Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker.
All right, welcome everyone to episode 5 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts, Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku, Japan's most fashionable quarantine bunker.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and absolutely random junk.
Put it in the trash now.
And burn it. Here are this week's news highlights.
Sayonara Golden Week and Hello Stay Home Week. Japan tries to use 12-day holiday to slow the spread of the coronavirus.
Japan downgrades its assessment of the nation's economy to rapidly getting worse.
Osaka police officer arrested for embezzlement after pocketing lost 10,000 yen bill turned in by kids.
What a jerk.
Jeez, you can't believe it.
This week in Japan.
First up, stay home week. So Governor Yuriko Koike on Thursday, the 23rd, in a media press conference, requested residents limit the frequency of grocery shopping to once every 3 days, and also announced her request for people to implement a 12-day holiday from April the 25th through May the 6th as a part of this stay home week in place of Golden Week.
Huh. You know, I already requested for holiday for that exact time. I wonder if I can get the holidays back from my company.
Probably not.
Wah, wah.
This stay home week came as a result of increasing fear on the government side that while lots of people are heeding the request to avoid unnecessary trips outside, still there are some concerns about the increase of people milling around in suburban shopping centers and supermarkets.
No, absolutely. It's really funny. I have seen pictures of, the trains are completely almost empty now, but the supermarkets are totally packed. And, in Japan, everything's really, really tightly packed together. Everyone's really, really close. So if you do go to a supermarket, you're going to have to wait in a supermarket line, and you're going to be surrounded by people completely. I mean, I think me and you both might have been in this situation over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going to the supermarket now is literally the scariest thing in our daily lives.
Absolutely. I haven't seen a lot of N95 masks in Japan, but the ones I have seen have been in the supermarket. So, it makes sense though. It's, even if it's right across the street from your house, I mean, you got to be careful because
definitely
you get stuck in those lines.
Well, I think because people are avoiding going outside, everyone, obviously, even if you are going to interact with people to some degree, you want to decrease the amount of interactions with random people in close quarters. And of course, really, Japanese supermarket is the worst possible place to encounter that sort of thing.
Right. And some Americans listening, that are used to supermarkets in the U.S. Might not be familiar with this. In the States, we're familiar with the gigantic Walmarts that are kind of like these huge warehouses that are never ending. But in Japan, it's much, much more tighter, the spaces, and people line up very diligently, one behind the other, and they're quite close, actually. So, yeah, it's definitely a danger zone.
Yeah, if you were to try and compare supermarkets overseas or in Western countries to supermarkets in Japan, it really is like putting the entire content of a supermarket into the size of a dollar store.
Yes, that's probably a great comparison.
And so getting back to the matter at hand, so Koike said in the press conference that this year, obviously, it's not Golden Week, but stay-at-home week, and I want to ask all Tokyo residents to refrain from non-essential travel, and especially to refrain from going to sightseeing spots in other prefectures and going to visit relatives back home.
That's going to be a tough one.
That is a tough one because Golden Week, the end of April, the beginning of May in Japan, this is really one of the traditional holidays that Japanese quite often use to go visit relatives in rural areas.
Yes. I mean, this week might be the only week out of the year that they have the chance to go back. Of course, we have the Obon holiday and the end of the year holiday, but really Golden Week, is notorious for traveling, going back to your hometown. And much like, people in New York City, most people that live in New York actually aren't from New York, right? They're transplants. Same thing's true in Tokyo. So most of the Japanese that are living and working here are transplants from more rural areas. And it's very, very common for them to go back to visit their family, visit their grandparents. And it's actually a big economic boost usually, because most of them might go to Universal Studios in Osaka or travel to Urayasu to go to Disneyland.
Now, one thing is for certain, obviously, the travel economy in Japan has been absolutely slaughtered. And obviously it's unfortunate, but it's tough to argue the other way around. But I guess the real question here is, Japan is trying to use this 12-day extended holiday to slow the spread of the coronavirus. But do you think it will work?
I think 50% at least. I think at least 50% of Japanese will return back to their hometowns. This is still a request. There's not any kind of punishment for not obeying the request, right?
You know what, though? I think that you're right in thinking that the people in Tokyo are going to want to kind of color outside the box and go back to their hometowns, even though they've been asked not to. However, I do think a lot of their relatives in rural Japan will say, actually, you're kind of sort of not welcome this time.
Don't come back this time.
No, honestly, because, you hear these isolated incidents of people in rural areas actually being ostracized or talked ill of or even attacked. There was there have been some isolated incidents of some kind of antagonistic activities of people who have gone to the rural areas, or for instance, you can see that they have a license plate from Tokyo or Osaka and they're in a rural area. And on Twitter, these people are just getting ripped to shreds.
And especially anyone below the age of 40. There's lots of tests coming out. I was just speaking with my brother-in-law, who's a doctor in New York City. And, I think they tested 20 pregnant women in the hospital. And amongst them, 8 of them actually tested positive for the coronavirus. And then 80% of them were below the age of 40 and didn't show any symptoms. So just carriers, right? So if you're below the age of 40, you have no symptoms, and you live in Tokyo, there's like a really high chance that you've been exposed to the virus. So, you're basically a carrier at that point. And then if you go back home, you're just infecting everyone in the...
So, dear listeners, don't hang out with us. We probably have the corona.
Stay away.
Speaking of the lost economic opportunity of the no longer golden week, Japan has just downgraded its assessment of the nation's economy to rapidly getting worse, which is, just some additional icing on the already not very tasty looking cake of this year's results. Kyoto reported that the Japanese government has downgraded its key economic assessment again. And of course, this is due to the global coronavirus pandemic. And it didn't even start with the COVID pandemic either. In Q4 last year, Japan's economic growth shrank an annualized real 7.1% after the consumption tax rate hike, which was 8%, which actually went up to 10% October the 1st of last year. And ever since then, it has really had a negative effect on private spending. And that rolled into this year. And then we got hit with coronavirus, and it's just not looking good.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Anyone who's, working in a B2C market here in Japan knows that, after the tax hike last year, we already faced a very, very kind of severe market where consumers are just much more selective on how they spend their money. And a lot of companies do price adjustments in January. So any importer, right? So, you had the tax hike in October, lots of price adjustments in January, coronavirus, February, March, April. So, this is just, gosh, a lot of companies are either going to go bankrupt or they're going to be floated by the government and other debt instruments.
No, definitely. I think that the situation in Japan is not looking good That being said, the situation globally, I mean, the situation in America, the situation in Europe is looking absolutely disastrous. So I really wonder if Japan, that there might be an opportunity for Japan to recover more quickly than other countries. That's not to say that we're in recovery mode now. We're still very much in the thick of this. And I think we're still looking at the data, and the government is very cautious in its interpretation of the data. But I would say it does seem like we could see a return to some level of normal life within the next few months. But the situation in the United States, the situation in Europe, I don't know if it's going to work out like that over there, because the numbers are just much, much worse.
Absolutely. And, for those who are listening who don't really know a whole lot about the coronavirus situation in Japan, maybe if you're in the States, they're already talking about the plan to go back to normal. And what's the strategy there? What businesses will go back? In Japan, we're still facing the issue of we're not testing a lot. I was reading this morning, South Korea, as of April 14th, had carried out about 400,000 tests. In Japan, just this week and into the end of April, we just surpassed 100,000. So we're still at 1/4 the test amount of a country that's right next door to us. And, we're both right next door to the epicenter of this, right? China. So we're, as you said, we're still very much in the thick of it. We're just still trying to contain the situation. We're not anywhere near a point where we can be like, okay, yeah, everyone needs to go back to work on this date, which is the conversation they're having in the States right now.
Yes, definitely. Well, and also it's, South Korea has really kind of promoted this test more and then test again stance. In Japan, if you want to get tested for COVID-19, you got to look at the flow chart and call the call center.
It's a series of tubes.
It really is.
Yeah.
And so they've taken very different approaches. The figures in Japan, actually, as of the time of this recording, actually, I just saw a tweet showing the weekly figures, and it looked like Tokyo had 3 weeks ago 600 some cases. Then last week it bumped up to 700 some cases, but this week it actually bumped back down to 600 some additional cases. So the bad news is that it's not stopping. It's,
Right.
It's still kind of bobbing up and down. But the good news is we're not seeing that exponential kind of race to a disaster situation that we saw in the United States, that we saw in France, that we saw in Spain and Italy and the United Kingdom.
Right. And, there's a lot of theories popping up about this too. Why isn't it as severe in Japan as it's been in even certain cities in Italy and in the US, especially Chicago? There's a story of a grandfather that flew from Italy to a birthday party in Chicago, and he infected his entire family. And then after that, I think
Happy birthday!
and then he flew to another city, infected everyone there. And the first party, I think 3 people died.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's still a lot of talk, and I don't think the scientists are going to be able to say anything conclusive until about after a year or year and a half. But, there is the idea of herd immunity. There is the idea that Japan and South Korea are quite close to China, and we have a lot more exposure to these other East Asian countries and markets. So a lot of these viruses, and, the coronavirus right now is actually one of only 200 that we know to exist in fruit bats, for example. So,
those megabats. Yes, our regular listeners will know that on our last episode, we suggested that our listeners make sure to kill all of the megabats because they have caused the coronavirus. And those dirty pangolins, they are evil.
What's it called when the government allows you to kill? Like in Florida, we're allowed to kill alligators.
Oh, it's like a hunting license.
A hunting license.
Got my megabat hunting license, gonna go murder me some megabats with my shotgun. Resident Florida man Aaron Randall has rediscovered alligator hunting. So.
I just did a quick Google search because I'm trying to figure out what it's called, and I Googled Florida alligator hunting. An ad popped up. Florida alligator hunting. Book your trip today. You're Year-round hunting and 100% success. We have your tag ready. Take your family on the experience of a lifetime with our year-round guided hunts. So they're hunting wild boar and alligators, I guess. But
crystal meth and missing teeth sold separately.
But I mean, this is kind of like a mandate, right? Because around NASA, where they launch all the space shuttle, right? There's alligators everywhere.
A bunch of rednecks trying to catch them.
Yeah. You know what, though? The space shuttle actually helps out a lot because the fire that's generated from it kills like close to 300 to 1,000 alligators every time it launches.
You mean to tell me that rocket fuel is making the most delicious gosh darn fried gator this side of the Mississippi?
They're launching this Thursday. We're going to have ourselves some roasted gator.
That's some barbecue for you.
Fun Florida fact.
All right, listeners, we are currently accepting donations of sauce. Well, speaking of backwater tendencies, next up we have this Osaka police officer who was arrested for embezzlement after pocketing a lost $10,000 bill turned in by kids.
So on April 14th, two boys, a 14-year-old middle school student and an 11-year-old elementary school student, found a 10,000 yen bill on a street in the Imafuku Higashi area of Osaka's Joto ward.
After the boys turned the bill into the Joto police station, the officer on duty, 21-year-old Takumi Nozawa, admitted to pocketing it instead of filing a lost item report.
Upon his arrest on suspicion of embezzlement, Nozawa confessed, stating that, "I took it for living expenses. I am filled with regret for betraying the children who handed over the bill."
And for overseas listeners, this might sound kind of ridiculous. I mean, even a kid finds a $100 bill on the street and they turn it into the police.
Right. You know, in Japan, whenever you're saving a seat at a restaurant, you actually put your wallet or purse on the table and you walk away and you don't look back because people don't steal in this country.
Yeah, and every time you go back to the States, you kind of have to put your guard up because, you want to put your phone down at the table at Starbucks, but,
right.
You might come back and there might not be a phone there anymore.
Yeah.
And, of course, Japan has a really interesting culture of lost and found. And so, did you know this, Aaron? If you lose anything, even, a cheap 100 yen umbrella on the subway, they'll actually bag it and tag it, and they have to keep it at the Lost and Found Center for like a year.
Oh my God, a year?
Yeah, it's some ridiculous period. So if you lose anything in Japan, there is a pretty decent chance you'll get it back. Mm-hmm. Unless that thing is a road bike, in which case it was stolen and you're screwed.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Parker, I probably had 7 of the really cheap bikes just stolen, but they're not really stolen, right? You park them in the wrong place. They get tagged by the police. There's a guy that goes around every day and picks up all the bikes, and then they get shipped to somewhere that I don't know.
So somewhere in Chiba,
yes.
20 of Aaron's bikes are just waiting to be picked up.
Supposedly they all go to China too after that. So it's this huge ecosystem of, getting the bikes
There's
to China.
There's probably a penguin riding around on one of your bikes right now. He's just penguin about. So, of course, because Japan does have a very strong culture of if you find a lost item, you are supposed to turn it into the police.
Right.
The mother of the boys on April the 20th actually contacted the station after she had not heard back whether the bill had been processed as a lost item. I guess she was a bit suspicious. And so once that claim was filed, Nozawa surfaced as a person of interest since he was the officer on duty at the time the boys arrived at the station.
I kind of feel bad for this police officer because, guys, it's 10,000 yen. That's $100, right? And to be accused of embezzlement for $100, that sucks.
I don't know. I mean, I want to feel bad for him, but at the same time, he's a police officer. If it was if it was anybody else, then I'd want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But
right.
Police officers, don't they have to swear an oath to protect and serve and not steal from kids?
He's probably bragging to his friends that night.
He was probably sitting right next to that politician at the Sekukawa. Oh, I'm going to get an extra deep kiss tonight. It's going to be 10,000 yen deeper. Gross. So in a statement to media, Chief Inspector Wataru Miyazaki said, "It is regrettable that one of our officers was arrested. Based on the facts of the case, we will deal with this matter strictly." Which is, what a Japanese government entity says anytime that something bad happens involving one of their personnel. Mm-hmm. I was actually kind of hoping for something a little bit more colorful. It is Osaka after all.
Yeah. We're going to whip him.
We're going to tie him to the statue of the guy with the glasses and hope that he catches the corona.
He will be on public display all weekend tied to the statue.
We're actually going to make him go to the red light district because then we know he'll get the corona.
That would be that's evil.
That would be evil.
Yeah.
Don't be evil.
All right. And then I think next we're going to actually jump into the random Inaka.
Random Inaka.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave. Random Inaka.
So, Aaron, have you ever been to Fukuoka?
I have been there so many times. Unfortunately, most of the time I go, I'm stuck in the hotel, but...
Ouch. Well, I don't know. I've only been a couple of times, but I would say that Fukuoka is perhaps the LA of Japan.
Ooh, the LA. Okay.
It feels very more coastal. I mean, theoretically Tokyo is a coastal city too, but you'd never know it because it's just so disconnected from the water.
You do not feel coastal. You have to go out to Chiba to feel the coastness.
The coastery.
Yeah.
But so, Fukuoka is sort of the economic capital of Kyushu. In Japan, we've got the big island, Honshu. We've got Hokkaido to the north, and then Shikoku kind of nestled in the western part of Honshu. Mm-hmm. And then at the bottom, we've got Kyushu. And Kyushu's kind of de facto capital. Of course, we're probably going to piss off some other people from Kyushu by saying this. This is most definitely Fukuoka.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's got an international airport. It's super close to South Korea. Mm-hmm. And it's got some really cool stuff. I don't know what it is. I think it's just that vibe. It certainly has. And that's why I think it's the LA of Japan, because it has a certain kind of West Coasty sort of vibe. People are a little bit laid back, but it's still a pretty big city. And there's nightlife and entertainment and lots of stuff going on.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Fukuoka has been open, right? And when I say open, for listeners who don't know a whole lot about Japanese history, Japan has, infamously been closed for most of its history. But I think Fukuoka was like...
Oh, it's actually closed again right now.
Yeah, it's closed right now. Fukuoka was like one of the only places that they used to allow trade with Europeans, correct?
Yes, because we had Dejima. It was Nagasaki Prefecture, Dejima.
Okay.
But so there was a little island off the coast of Nagasaki, and that was the only place that they'd let those... shifty duchies, go and trade with the Japanese feudal warlords.
Right. And, and today, like as you were saying, most of my friends, like from South Korea and Hong Kong, they won't even come to Tokyo. When they go to Japan, they just go to Fukuoka because, it's just maybe even an hour only plane ride from Seoul or from Hong Kong airport.
And it's a really beautiful city, and I feel like it's also a lot closer to kind of more rural areas and countryside and tasty strawberries and really tasty strawberries than Tokyo. So if you want a good mix of not just city but also countryside, then it really is a top pick for destinations to go to in Japan.
For sure.
When I went to Fukuoka, I actually went to go check out Fukuoka Growth Next. And so actually this is the hub or the new hub of Fukuoka's growing startup scene. And actually in recent years, the mayor of Fukuoka, Mayor Takashima, has been very vocal and proactive in inviting startups, both Japanese and foreign to come to Fukuoka to build their startups in Fukuoka and to create this sort of startup ecosystem.
Right, right. This is something I have heard a lot about. They actually have a startup visa program in Fukuoka, which is really, really nice for anyone that wants to jump into being an entrepreneur here in Japan. It's notoriously difficult to start up your own company here, so they have a nice, smooth ease into it via this visa program.
And just an aside on that, I think a lot of people are interested in Japan, and a lot of people in Silicon Valley and people in the tech scene are interested in, they kind of flirt with the idea of, man, it sure would be cool if I could, live in Japan or be in Japan or do what I'm doing here, but not here, but in Japan.
Right.
And there is a lot of red tape, and there are a lot of implicit sort of hurdles that people see and think of that might discourage them from wanting to come to Japan and start their own company and kind of be here. But to be honest, I mean, the startup visa is just one example, but it is surprisingly easy to set up shop here. And whether you're kind of creating a Japanese branch of a foreign startup or creating a brand new startup from zero, there are opportunities for you to get a visa and kind of move over here. And I mean, I've seen several very successful examples. Actually, I was able to meet the first recipient of the startup visa in Fukuoka, and the person who received it, wasn't necessarily even that fluent in Japanese, but they just really loved Fukuoka's startup scene and vibrant culture. And compared to, a Silicon Valley or a New York City or a London or a Paris, the costs are exponentially cheaper.
We should mention that, a lot of people have an image that Tokyo is quite expensive. Actually, the main center of Tokyo, the real estate prices and whatnot, cost of living is quite expensive. But outside the suburbs, which is still part of the greater Tokyo metropolitan area, is very fair, and nothing like New York City or Hong Kong. So, it can be anywhere from a half to a 1/4 the price of living in Tokyo, which is pretty incredible if you're a Silicon Valley type company or you're a SaaS company, that you just need a laptop to run your business, right?
Definitely. And, not just obviously the logistics and the kind of creature comforts, but the scene and just like the culture are also really interesting. Fukuoka Growth Next, I just mentioned, is a co-working space they actually set up in an abandoned or a former elementary school. And so they turned Daimyo Elementary School, which was really kind of funny because it's this elementary school for these little kids right in the middle of Fukuoka's biggest nightlife and entertainment district. So to be perfectly honest with you, it's much better now as a co-working space than it was as an elementary school.
Yeah.
But not only do they have a co-working space where you can get your own private office or, like a hot desk sort of setup, they also have the Fukuoka branch of a very famous bar that's famous among kind of Japanese entrepreneurs called Awa Bar.
Awa Bar, what is that?
That's a bar that specializes in all kinds of sparkling wine.
Ooh.
And so it's really cool. I mean, if you go to Awa Bar in Tokyo, you'll probably run into, the Tokyo startup bro scene. But I don't know what it is about Fukuoka. I mean, you can go to the Awa Bar in Fukuoka and you might run into, Masa-son's younger brother, Taizo-son, or I went there and met the chairman of DMM.com.
Nice.
Totally random. He just showed up.
It's a lot smaller, right? It's more compact.
Yes.
Right? Everybody's there. It almost reminds me kind of like a Portland too, a Portland style city where
Definitely
it's not too big. Tokyo, Hong Kong, New York are kind of overwhelmingly huge, but Fukuoka, Portland, and maybe even LA, you can kind of visualize the city and also know where everyone's at without it being too overwhelming. Tokyo for me is a little too overwhelming, to be honest.
Yes. Well, I think especially someone who wants a startup culture that might be a little more friendly and less daunting, kind of the anti-Silicon Valley would probably be a little bit more comfortable in a Fukuoka rather than a Tokyo. Because, I mean, Tokyo is the center of Japan's economy. So
yes.
I really do feel like if, you meet someone who's doing a startup in Tokyo, your guard's going to be up. So it's like, yeah, you and a billion other people. What's so special about your app?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, what is it? 90% or 95% of all companies fail within the first 6 months or something.
Exactly. Even separately from Fukuoka Growth Next, there's also a lot of really cool kind of history and culture in Fukuoka. For instance, these yatai or food carts, which also serve as portable bars. And so in Tokyo and other major cities around Japan, these sort of food carts or like hawkers, as you would say in Singapore, are heavily illegal, even though they used to have them, in the Edo period and in the old days.
I didn't know they were illegal.
Yeah. And so in Fukuoka, it's one of the few places where there are a limited number of permits to have these food carts.
Oh, okay.
And so in Daimyo or kind of along the river, you'll see these carts just on the street, and they've just got, sometimes you'll see these kind of illegally carts in front of Shinjuku Station or those sort of things, the yatai.
Right.
But they're actually legally mandated, and they're all over the place in Fukuoka. Really cool. And you can get some of the best ramen and drinks. And I mean, you go out there on a Friday night, obviously, hopefully it's not like this right now, but it's popping. It looks like, roppongi full of food carts. It's something else.
Roppongi full of food carts. That's an interesting... I can't even imagine that, actually.
It blew my mind because I'd never seen something like it. Obviously, that doesn't really exist in Tokyo. So that's another reason why Fukuoka it's got there's something special in the air, I think.
Now that I think about it, I've only been there in the winter. You probably traveled there in other seasons.
Actually, last time I went was February.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why I have to share this with everyone, but I'm going to. If you go to Fukuoka and you're in, the main area near Daimyo, you have to eat this delicious burger at this restaurant called Hungry Heaven.
Hungry Heaven.
It is the tastiest burger I've ever had in my entire life.
This is a tasty burger.
There you have it, guys. You have to check this burger out.
Yes. Drop what you're doing right now. We'll wait until the coronavirus has settled down a little bit. Go to Fukuoka, go to Hungry Heaven, and eat a very tasty burger.
This is not sponsored by Hungry Heaven.
I want to eat a burger.
Yeah, me too. All right, and while we're on the topic of business and economy, let's jump into our next section, Yenny and a Bill, y'all.
Yenny and a Bill, y'all.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave. Yenny and a Bill, y'all.
So this week we're going to be talking about pachinko. So, Bloomberg has reported on the growing battle between pachinko parlors and the local governments who want them to shut down to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Around Japan, you can still see morning lines of people waiting to get inside pachinko parlors. I think, Parker, me and you have both seen this quite a lot.
Yeah, like every morning.
There's actually one right across the street from my apartment.
You can see these morning lines because the parlors only open at like 9:30 or 10. And apparently these people who are either addicted to pachinko or there also are professional players who have figured out the Konami code of getting these machines to pay out well. And they're actually professional pachinko players. But both of these parties tend to hit the parlors right when they open. And so there are certain, I don't know how they trade this information, if there's like a secret carrier pigeon network or bulletin board where they kind of trade secrets about where the machines are hot. But for whatever reason, these guys like to line up before the place opens. And as soon as the door opens, it's like Black Friday every morning. And I guess, me first, I want to get machine number 25.
I'm actually surprised this doesn't exist in America. I mean, even the legal system, the way it's set up, I won't get into that. For those who don't know, pachinko is a $192 billion industry that is centered around a gambling game with pinball-like machines.
One interesting thing about pachinko is that gambling in Japan is illegal under the law, but it exists and is widespread and, really all over the place. I mean, you could see a pachinko parlor, right down the street from a train station or even a school.
Yep.
But It's actually not technically gambling.
After you win at the pachinko place, they give you some kind of ticket, and then
No, they give you the balls, the little metal balls.
They give you metal balls.
And you take those metal balls to the change place, which is outside of the pachinko parlor. It's a totally different place.
Right.
And there you can exchange those little metal balls for cold hard cash.
That's awesome.
If you win.
Yeah.
And so you always see a big line in front of the pachinko parlor, but you never see a big line in front of the shop where you trade in the balls. I don't think the odds are very good.
Yeah.
But so pachinko parlors have come over serious government scrutiny since the state of emergency was declared, because pachinko parlors are famously poorly ventilated. I mean, I don't know. Every time you walk by a pachinko parlor, the sliding doors open and you feel that waft of air conditioning and cigarette smoke. And it just is the most repulsive smell that you could really experience in Japan, I think.
Yes, on my second time to Japan when I was here on vacation in 2010, I went to a pachinko parlor with a Japanese friend, and we were there all night. And I think I got a sinus infection the next week because it was so bad. Yeah, man. I mean, God, you think you've been to a bad bar with lots of smoke? You need to go to a pachinko parlor and experience that air. I mean, that is some nasty. The whole ventilation systems have to be completely molded. With the cigarette smoke.
Don't even want to think about it. Well, and also, so the other thing about pachinko parlors is, I'm sure there's a strategic reason for this, but they're very loud. And so all of the machines make noise, and they make a lot of noise. And they seem to, each machine is like inviting the players to come and play, I guess. But, every time you see the sliding doors of a pachinko parlor automatically open, it's, plume of cigarette smoke and loud machine noise.
Yeah, very loud, like anime-esque machine noise just screaming at you. And a lot of times there's only like maybe 2 or 3 people in there, I've noticed.
Not in my neighborhood. Apparently the machines are always hot where I live because they are always packed. The government is having a huge battle with these pachinko parlors because obviously they are covered and have been scrutinized upon because of the inability of these parlors, which obviously the machines are right next to each other, literally, like slot machines.
Right.
So you can't really social distance in a pachinko parlor.
No.
So the government has asked Pretty Please with Sugar on Top for these pachinko parlors to close their doors for the duration of the state of emergency. And the pachinko parlors, who I would imagine like money, said yes. Maybe not the majority, but I think a pretty decent number of them have stayed open.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been much to the chagrin of Economy Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura, who has waged war on these pachinko parlors. And he has also taken issue with the fact that even when some close, because the others aren't closing, he's noted that when they are open in one area, I hear that people travel from other prefectures to gather there, which is absolutely right. I mean, literally, there's probably a caravan of gambling addicts going from prefecture to prefecture to find the open pachinko parlors so that they can gamble away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And a lot of people thought that gambling was illegal in Japan. Well, it is, but pachinko's legal.
Well, it's in a gray area, but there's a whole bunch of them, so it's de facto legal, legally. Illegal, legal, semi-legal.
Yeah.
There's lots of things in Japan that are kind of semi-legal in a legal gray area, but nobody seems to pick up the blowtorch and cause a crusade against it.
Yeah.
So obviously the government wants to shut the pachinko parlors down. The pachinko parlors like to make money, and the government cannot force them to close their doors. So what is the government doing? Minister Nishimura has hinted that he plans to publish a list of shame of all pachinko parlors that are operating as normal in hopes that they will be pressured into closing, which that is actually enabled. The government can do that as a part of the new influenza special measures law, which includes a clause that grants officials the authority to publicly announce the names of businesses that do not comply without a legitimate reason. On the other hand, this list would also be a terrific source for those gambling addicts and professional pachinko players who want to know where to go.
Yeah.
So it's basically like the government of Japan's official guide to where to scratch that itch.
They didn't think of the Freakonomics aspect of it. But, I think the list of shame is a really good concept for Japan. We saw some infections in Ichikawa and Chiba that happened at a sports gym. 3 guys got infected, and they put the name of the sports gym on television nationwide. And then they shut down 200 sports gyms, that company did, because it got all over the TV. So yeah, public shame has some incredible effects. It is effective in a lot of situations.
I think, unfortunately for the sports gym, I don't think they published the name of the gym for the purpose of public shame, but that's definitely how it worked out.
Yeah. All right, and I think this is a good segue into our next segment, Japanese politics. Wow.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave. Japanese politics. Wow.
This week, we're going to talk about Governor Yuriko Koike's rise back into the public spotlight amidst the COVID-19 pandemic.
So Governor Koike is using her increased media exposure as leverage ahead of the gubernatorial election. She recently scored a partial victory in a face-off with the central government over the scope of business closures that should be targeted under the state of emergency. Koike, a former television news anchor, has been giving regular COVID-19 updates on YouTube in Japanese and English, which is really awesome. She has also appeared with popular YouTuber Hikakin to reach out to young Japanese.
Yeah, she really has masterfully handled this crisis situation. And every time you see her in a media press conference or in a television commercial, and there are all sorts of different things that the Tokyo government is doing under her leadership to try and curb the spread of the coronavirus, she's really handling it, 100% and showing a real kind of level of leadership through this crisis that I think at least the people of Tokyo have been looking for and waiting for.
Absolutely. I think we talked about it before, but the kind of comparison to the States with Trump and Mayor Cuomo of New York City. Did I say his name right?
Cuomo.
Cuomo.
Cuomo. You got a big balls and made out of pasta.
So the kind of dichotomy between Trump and Cuomo is really not seen so much here in Japan.
Well, so obviously there is a bit of tension between the Koike-led Tokyo government and the national government. Like you just mentioned just a minute ago, there was a bit of a back and forth over the scope of these business closure requests. The central government originally wanted a more limited scope to try and salvage the economy, but Koike was very adamant and successful in getting the government to widen the scope. And I mean, basically now we have what's akin to almost a full shutdown in Tokyo from, for the next 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. So Prime Minister Abe has been less successful in winning points with younger generations. His recent posting on social media of a video in response to one by Japanese singer Gin Hoshino showing him relaxed, petting his dog, sipping from a teacup, and reading a book backfired, despite his intent to deliver the message that staying home is necessary to curb the number of new cases.
And I think this is a really solid example of the difference in how these two leaders are able to communicate their leadership. Prime Minister Abe has a bit of a disadvantage here, actually, because as the prime minister, he actually doesn't have the same power as Governor Koike has in order to do concrete actions. So what the prime minister can do, obviously, as the leader of government is very macro, but he can't really do the sort of PR activities and communications planning and more concrete action steps that Governor Koike can make, in order to, do the nuts and bolts, demand businesses shut down, tell the supermarkets what to do. A lot of the power in this law is actually delegated to the prefectural governors. And so Governor Koike is, of course, one of those. But this shows a bit of a different dynamic, obviously. And so I think with the Instagram video, which is now infamous, the intention was to show this kind of togetherness with the people of Japan, but it just came off as really tone deaf. And to be honest, it was a mismatch with what the public expects their political leaders to be doing right now. And obviously, I mean, to a certain degree, any political leader right now is going to catch some flack because, around the world, all these developed countries that were supposed to be prepared for this sort of thing have caught on fire. And so people want to hold their leaders accountable. And of course, it's everybody's fault except for mine. So I think that in Japan and everywhere else around the world, people are looking at their, elected officials saying, what the hell? We're dying. Help us.
No, absolutely.
And definitely the right response does not involve videos where you're sipping tea. I mean, if anything, I hate to say it, but, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, I mean, he got the coronavirus.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that shows that he's one of us more than anything else, that he got the virus. So, from a PR perspective, if Prime Minister Abe caught the corona, I actually think his popularity would go up. I don't think that's something that he should endeavor to do, but there's a lot of schadenfreude going on in modern politics. It's totally unavoidable. And if you look at the way that the public reacts to these politicians, they want to see him suffer. They don't want to see him sitting pretty and sipping tea.
So Koike really seems to have read the playbook on crisis communication from back to back. She told reporters in late March after meeting with Abe at his office, protecting the capital means protecting Japan.
Governor Koike really is a badass when it comes to managing crises. And you can actually say the exact opposite too. When everything's hokey dokey and okay, her communication style can come off as a bit too spicy or too, everything to Governor Koike is an emergency or a serious matter. For instance, the situation with the Toyosu market, the Tsukiji market moving to Toyosu.
Oh, right, yeah.
And, she was very successful in blowing that into a big issue. But once the kind of public rabble-rousery kind of died out, it really just kind of fell flat. And it ended up, they moved the market anyway. So I think that was sort of a misfire on the governor's part to use that potential opportunity to gain wider support. But obviously right now, as the fires are burning, you can really see Governor Koike shine I don't know what it is. I think it's certainly potentially part of the governor's personality that, when there's bad stuff happening, kind of like a superhero, spring into action.
Right. Everybody needs a leader.
Yes. And I think also just her kind of profile as a politician. She's switched political parties several times. She also very famously became governor after causing this big dissonance between herself and the local Tokyo chapter of the LDP. And of course, she was a lower house politician for the LDP before breaking rank and deciding to run for governor without appeasing the right power brokers. So there was a lot of bad blood around that. And so up until even recently, there was some speculation that there was a pretty big rift between Governor Koike's camp, which also includes the Tokyoites First political party and still happens to encompass a majority of the local politicians for the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. So not only is Koike powerful as governor, but when it comes to the local politics of Tokyo Metropolitan District, she has extreme influence over the decision-making process. Another thing, I was just talking with a colleague the other day who is a specialist in strategic communication, and he was even saying, Governor Koike, she is like a crisis magnet. It's Governor Koike, you want to make her shine, just add crisis.
Wax on, right hand. Wax off, left hand. Wax on, wax off.
That's good.
It's totally become part of her brand. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. She's definitely well respected and well known in the foreign community here in Tokyo for sure. So Koike has also used her penchant for creating sound bites or memes to get the message across. Her emphatically pronounced way of saying "you're too close," mitsu desu.
Let me do that.
Yeah.
Mitsu desu.
Has already inspired a video game and a DJ remix.
The DJ remix is actually pretty lit. Let's actually play it right now.
気の悪い密閉空間、多くの人の密集する場所、遠距離の会話での密接場面、密閉密集密接密閉密集密接。
They made her voice sound really sexy. It's got this really nice reverb on it.
It's kind of like a plastic lover,
Yeah, damn, man.
Dude, okay, so for our crazy vaporwave fans out there, okay, this remix is all right, but I think this needs a vaporwave version. So
Ooh.
It's a call to action. Somebody has to make the vaporwave remix of Mitsu desu.
That is...
You have been called upon by Tokyo Wave.
It's so aesthetically vaporwave too, to just take one soundbite and use that for the mix. So you guys, you have the work in front of you.
Maybe that's what we'll have to do over a stay-home week.
Yeah. Maybe we'll make it. We'll do a competition. You guys have to make a better vaporwave remix than us.
Mitsu desu love.
So obviously, her coining the term "stay home week" is another example of this kind of messaging she's able to do with sound bites. She's also starring in TV infomercials telling Tokyoites to stay inside.
This has two benefits for Governor Koike. Not only is she able to use her crisis communication ability to curb the spread and help the Tokyoites who she is mandated to serve, but also she has an election coming up in July. Obviously, some people and some critics of Koike are going to say, she's just doing this to make sure that she wins the re-election. Well, if she can prevent the spread of coronavirus in one of the world's major cities, then, God damn it, she can be governor again.
Hell yeah.
Remember our last governor? He was an asshole.
If only we could vote.
Oops. Small caveat there. But, speaking of music and vaporwave, and we were talking about these remixes, I think we want to switch gears and in our last segment let's talk about creative stuff time. Speaking of also people who have gone into quarantine in remote places, there is a new video from Mr. Kanye West live from his farmhouse quarantine bunker in Wyoming.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave. Let's talk about creative stuff time.
It ain't no joke, as Rakim said.
So, in my YouTube recommends, a highly edited and probably fake news video popped up. In the video, we see Kanye speaking at his over 1,000 acre farm, which he claims to have bought in Wyoming due to the fact that he couldn't get over 1,000 acres in California. He originally planned on using the area to build a community or a campus that he refers to. The video claims that Kanye predicted the events unrolling this year due to the coronavirus. Words that Kanye mumbled include lockdown, China, churches closed on Sundays. The edited video has Kanye saying to have had visions of cities being canceled, Coachella being canceled. So Parker, what's your take on this?
Well, you shared this with me, earlier this afternoon, and I immediately got out of my tinfoil hat and I had to see the uncut version.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
And so, I pulled up the 2-hour long video, and then I immediately found out that this shorter version is completely and totally fake and put together. Yeah. But it is funny as a fool. And in the unedited video, which is 2 hours long, if you are planning on watching it and you are not a huge fan of Kanye West, my suggestion is pass. Mm-hmm. But I actually found it kind of entertaining. It kind of gets you inside of, some of the more recent things that Ye has been doing with this kind of setting up this church and the Sunday service, and kind of his transition from really kind of the bad boy rapper to this, holy man who, for good or bad, has become extremely religious. And I mean, even I think the last album he released was like a religious album. I mean, it was like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, he dropped Jesus Walks, back in the day, but that was a very different kind of song.
Yeah, so the album you're referring to is called Jesus is King. And I listened to that when it dropped, the night that it dropped. I was a little disappointed compared to some of his previous work. But, all in all, it's still Kanye. It's got some incredible content on it. Kanye is pretty famous for sampling. From a musical perspective, Kanye is on par with artists like Daft Punk. And a lot of people that don't like Kanye might hear that and be like, what? But his sampling ability is out of this world. I mean, he can take stuff that no one's heard on records that were, from the 70s, from the 60s, whatever, and turn it into just the most fire beat you've ever heard. And all of the attention in the room is just pulled into this song that's playing, that is Kanye West.
Well, it's funny because, I mean, maybe that's a direct product of the fact that he is a little bit out there. I mean, watching the whole 2-hour video, he talks about his, a lot of his sort of opinions and observations on the current state of culture and society. And he puts together some pretty controversial opinions. Of course, perhaps the most interesting part of his religious transformation is, Ye turned from one extreme, from being this, I'm a sexy ass motherfucker and, all the bitches want me, to pornography is wrong.
Right.
And he actually, in the interview, he kind of fesses up to having a serious pornography addiction. And he is very quick to point to that pornography addiction as the major hurdle between him and refinding his faith.
No, absolutely. I think his journey over the past 20 years has been really incredible. I think you mentioned he opened up with, Jesus Walks, that kind of put him on the map. Then, he worked with pretty much everyone in the industry, and his ability to work with anyone and everyone from Jay-Z to Bon Iver is just absolutely incredible. Just 10 years ago, the song Power, it talks a lot about the obsession that I think he had with power at the time, and the obsession of power that comes with being that famous and having that much money. Because, Kanye really came from nothing. So he's a true rags to riches story, with very humble beginnings. His original mixtape on YouTube is quite incredible, which he made when, he had nothing.
Well, and of course, in recent years, he has really waned in popularity among some of his even core fans because of his controversial statements and also controversial political views. He very famously outed himself as an ardent supporter of United States President Donald Trump, which among a lot of his friends was the political equivalent of setting yourself on fire. So
right, yeah.
He really ostracized himself in a lot of the West Coast Hollywood communities that he happened to be right smack dab in the middle of. So now, I mean, he was excommunicated, but I think he's had somewhat of a comeback with these Sunday services. And, it's this whole kind of religious streak for him. Obviously, if it were any other Hollywood celebrity, you'd look at that and you'd be like, oh, well, they've gone crazy. Well, Ye was already crazy. So this is an interesting new direction.
He's always been crazy. That's the thing. People, pull up. Very famously, he did a Ellen interview about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and there's all these memes from the internet from that interview because they really made him look crazy on that show. But if you look at interviews with him from 10 years ago, it's the same Kanye. He hasn't changed. Yeah. And just an anecdote on him meeting with Donald Trump. I feel like that is part of his whole thing, even with his obsession with power and with his self-diagnosed and, self-professed obsession with power. It was almost like him saying, hey guys, this is what you do if you're obsessed with power. You meet with the next most powerful person on the planet. And, at the meeting too, right? Everyone was asking him, I think he was shaking hands with the president, and all the photographers were taking pictures. They're like, why are you here? He's like, I just wanted to say hi. There was no real reason.
Yeah.
It was all a publicity thing.
It's funny when also, Kanye, very famously said, 2020, I'm going to run for president. And now because he likes President Trump, he's actually said, well, now it's 2024. Prepare yourselves. Yeah, I'm preparing myself. I've bought so many popcorn kernels that we're going to need a really big popper.
Oh my God.
You know what? It might actually happen. And if it does, it's going to be hilarious.
Oh yeah. That's going to be the best entertainment, ever in the history of anything. Kanye West debating with actual politicians. Can you imagine this? And him actually having good stuff to say.
Coachella canceled. How do you rebut that?
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. One of the best videos of all time.
Well, speaking of Kanye West, he's actually a huge fan of Japan. Actually, he was just in Japan late last year to celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. And the Entertainment News reported that they went to Osaka and even kind of said hello to some local people, including journalism students of Monash University's Tokyo Journalism Field School.
Oh, wow. Yeah, back since the late 2000s, whenever he did the song Stronger, which was a kind of reimagining of Daft Punk's Stronger, the video actually contained lots of elements from the anime Akira, in which he was kind of on this robotic board thing. And all the visualizations from the music video, too, were from different anime. So, yeah, he's definitely had an interest in Japan for quite some time.
Well, I think he shares that with a lot of Hollywood celebrities and famous rappers. I remember even there's a couple of years ago, Will Smith's son, Jaden Smith, actually had a really famous music video where he's actually I think they filmed it right down the street from our studio here on Cat Street. Mm-hmm. And, he's like rapping and he's like with these like kind of street clothed kind of Japanese people. And they made like a big thing about the fact that he was, filming his music video in Tokyo.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that these rappers, celebrities, they all want to come to Japan. The biggest YouTuber in the world, PewDiePie, had his wedding in Japan just recently.
That's crazy.
Everybody wants to come here.
Why?
They're all obsessed with it. Hey, why did we come to Japan, right?
Well, I think I have a better reason than that, but not really.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You, listener, right there.
We want your feedback, comments, and ideas. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp. We will listen to your ideas, and we might even try something new. Also, if you're crazy enough to take us up on our call to action to make a vaporwave version of Koike's Mitsudes ongoing boomerang, please do send us a way that we can listen to that. And anyone who does submit us something that's cool, we will play it on a future episode of Tokyo Wave.
We hope you guys enjoyed Tokyo Wave. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Thank you, guys.
Catch you next week.